Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dave White, the host of the People Side of Fresh View. And today I have two guests who are going to talk to us about the whole issue of embezzlement and fraud and some other illegal things that take place in commerce in both and e-commerce. My guests are Don Jean and Tom Middleton, who are the founders of Focus Buyer. And before we dive into that, we would like to take phone calls for any of you who would like to call in. So the number for that is 908-347-7793. And before we talk specifically about the topic that you guys wanted to address today, tell us a little bit more about how, the two of you came to know each other and what prompted the founding of this new online application.
Okay, well, I guess I could start, Dave, but first I'd like to thank you for having us here. It's nice to be with you and your audience today. Don and I go back to, 1972. I was a young manager of purchases for Ingersoll Rand Company, and I had the need for a purchasing buyer.
Okay.
Somehow I got Don's resume. I interviewed Don. I recognized him as being a very sharp individual, very smart. He just graduated with his MBA from Cornell.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also throw in that he's also in the Hall of Fame for football at Cornell. So not only was he smart, he was athletic. I like sports, so we kind of hit it off very good.
Sure.
Don was a very good negotiator then, as he is now. He had an opportunity, if folks in this area remember RCA, he had an opportunity to go with RCA for a little bit more money than I could afford.
Mm-hmm.
But I really wanted Don, so I mentioned to him that, hey, Don, if you go to RCA, you may be doing a heck of a job, but you could be in a telephone booth. Nobody will recognize it. You come with Ingersoll Rand, I promise to put the spotlight on you, and so your merits will be recognized.
Okay.
And it so happened that Don, being a hard worker, a conscientious employee, rose from a buyer all the way up to be the corporate director of worldwide procurement for Ingersoll Rand.
Wow.
So Don and I go back a long way. At this point, I would say we're like brothers. Okay. We have a lot of experience in purchasing, strategic sourcing.
Sure.
And about 5 years ago, thereabouts, we got together and said, hey, we have all of this knowledge. How about if we give back to the profession? And not only that, but the technology was there that was enable us to actually do it.
Okay.
Because the holy grail when we were practicing was to eliminate paper. So now with the new technology, cloud-based, we were able to do that.
Excellent.
So,
Tom, you were Don's boss right out of college.
Yes, right, yes.
That says a lot about the quality of your relationship. I don't know too many bosses that I'd want to go into partnership with, to be honest with you. Right. So it's been a long time.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
Tom was a really tough boss. He expected a lot out of his recruits.
Okay.
And he has a great background himself. He has his bachelor's degree from St. Bonaventure,
Mm-hmm.
and he has his master's from Seton Hall. MBA.
All right.
And he's recently been inducted into St. Bonaventure's Hall of Fame for baseball.
Really?
Yeah.
So we're talking to two college Hall of Famers.
Right.
Excellent.
That have trouble walking up the stairs.
Well, yeah, we won't go there. That's very cool. That's very cool. You had indicated to me when we talked about doing the show that the thing that you'd really like to talk about was the issue of fraud, embezzlement, the scope of the problem, and how it's becoming even worse than it's ever been. So let's get started with that. I mean, when you think of, what is it really? What is it you're talking about?
Well, as you probably are aware, Dave, folks have been trying to take people's money since biblical times.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Judas Iscariot, who used to keep the purse, okay, and used to take money from the purse for his own needs back in biblical times.
Okay.
And since that time, there's scams and frauds that's perpetrated every day against every business, every organization, even everyday consumers.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States alone, it's $65 billion a year.
Wow.
$3 billion is committed against senior citizens, those folks who are identified as 65 and over.
Okay. So
Yeah.
they're particularly vulnerable.
Particularly vulnerable, and that population is going to grow. Right now, it's
Yeah.
only 15%, about 50 million people. So that's about $60 per person.
Right.
And you can imagine what's going to happen in 5 or 10 years when there's double that amount of folks who are over 65, as the baby boomers are reaching 66 at 10,000 a day.
Yeah.
So you're going to have maybe 30%. And then if people find more creative ways to take your money, okay, it's going to be $6 billion or maybe $10 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
Worldwide, it's estimated to be somewhere between 1.5 trillion and 3 trillion every year.
The $65 billion was just in the United States alone, Don?
Just in the United States alone.
Wow.
Okay, and it's a national disgrace, really. Everybody wants our money, and it seems to be a crime for us to want to hold on to our money, but it's not a crime for people to take our money. And so we figure that we needed to do something to try to be helpful in eliminating fraud and embezzlement.
Okay. So that's built into your application?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, we have several goals. One is to drive the cost of making a purchase and paying for a purchase as close to zero as possible.
Okay.
Both
Efficiency, basically?
efficiency and negotiations and a consistent process, okay, as well as being able to negotiate. And so we decided to do something that was online,
Mm-hmm.
so that anyone, a business, a nonprofit organization, a social organization, or the everyday consumer buying a big ticket item now, not for retail type
Right.
items and services, but a big ticket item, could be registered, up and running, and professionally buying and managing all of their purchases and payments in 60 minutes or less.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying basically your application gives people access to technology and processes and capabilities that they haven't had before.
Absolutely, Dave.
Okay.
Right. Prior to this, larger corporations were the only ones that could afford technology, etc.
Right.
Thus putting the small and mid-sized business at a disadvantage, a competitive disadvantage.
Sure.
Now we're leveling the playing field, if you will.
Okay. Well, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
The issue that, the fraud and embezzlement, it's always, like you say, it's always been with us. But I get the sense that the scope of it has become much larger. Is that accurate?
Yeah, there are probably 100 ways, okay, that folks try to get our money, okay, when we try to buy products or services.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they try to get our money and not give us anything for it. And the problem for small businesses and nonprofits and social organizations and consumers is that they've never really had a quick process where they can create a contract with their own terms and conditions of purchase.
Mm-hmm.
As most people know, and in fact, any of the listeners can weigh in on this, but when I ask the question of larger audiences, who has ever been cheated or scammed in commerce? If there's 100 people, about half of them raise their hands,
Right.
sometimes more. And then if I ask them, well, if you haven't, do you know somebody who has? And nearly 90% of the folks raise their hands. They know somebody that's been scammed or defrauded in commerce and e-commerce.
Yeah.
And what we
It's
try,
scary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it really is. And what we try to do also, Dave, is there are a lot of number of organizations out there that can help you recover your funds. Or
Better
whatever.
Business bureaus, things like that?
Sure, but what we're focusing on is the prevention,
Okay.
which is to not have it happen
In the first place.
In the first place.
Okay.
Okay, so that's where we're very unique. I
Okay.
think, right?
Well,
Yeah.
we're going to need to talk about that.
Sure.
Later on in the show, because I think that's something that people would be very interested in knowing more about, because obviously, once it happens, then
Right.
you're kind of behind the eight
Right,
ball.
Sure.
and most times you're on your own too.
Well,
People say a token will help you, but when somebody else has your funds and you can't locate them, and they live across country or overseas or something, the chances of getting it back are very slim.
yeah.
Yeah, trying to recover from a situation is very difficult for
Right.
the individual buyer, if you will, or consumer.
Well, it goes back to the kind of the large corporation has more options or alternatives to do that, and they've got the resources to pursue it. But the normal individual,
Even if you get the chance to go into a small claims court,
right?
okay, to present your case, the first question the judge asks in a small claims court is, what does the contract say? Okay, and the truth of the matter is, folks just haven't had the ability to create a contract. Okay, now they can create a contract in minutes. Once the judge understands what the contract says, the judge's next question is, well, tell me about the performance of both parties to the contract. And that's usually a he said, she said situation.
Right.
Okay, and it's up to the judge to try to determine, who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. Well, with our process, all of that information from both parties is interactively added to the site. So around the purchase order document, so that all the buyer or consumer has to do is print out the contract, hand it to the judge, print out the performance to the contract, and hand it to the judge.
So your site will provide the consumer with a contract.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
In
And
minutes.
that's something they have not had before.
Not at all. Right. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times the seller has a contract, right?
Most times the seller has a contract, and most times
The buyer doesn't.
buyer doesn't, and most times the buyer doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to read through the fine print, and that causes a lot of problems.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reason I never became a lawyer, because I couldn't, I couldn't
Right.
stand how it was written.
Right. Right.
No,
Well, see,
absolutely.
Sure, and it gives visibility and traceability to the whole transaction. So,
So if
you
you,
have- you have a
so you
record.
are in a better position if in fact you do have to pursue some
Sure.
recourse, because you've got you've got a track record right
You're
there.
You got a track record, you got a document, okay, and it's no longer a one-sided issue where the seller or supplier is forefront in terms of providing documentation.
Sort of evens the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, as Tom says, that's what it does.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Now, why the significant growth? Why has it become? Because as you said, it's growing exponentially. I understand our society, or our in the U.S. at least, our populations are getting older, but is it a question of because they can? Because there's easier ways to do it? I mean, does the e-commerce, how much has that contributed to it?
well, the big thing is how rapidly e-commerce is
Taking off?
increasing. Taking off, right.
Okay.
And that's just inviting people that have bad intentions, let me put it that way, to find ways to scam other people or whatever, or to take advantage of it. So
Okay.
in a way, there's good and bad, okay? The e-commerce is great, okay?
Yeah.
And it's going to become more and more prevalent. But with that is the possibility of fraud, embezzlement, and whatever. So
Increases
right.
it makes it
Increase
easier,
the chances.
basically?
Yeah. So why does it happen?
Yeah.
Is a good question, and certainly one of the things is economic burden and stress. We find ourselves with many folks with economic burdens and stress from
Sure.
not having jobs, spending a lot of money for college, and being in debt. And the average job tenure now is less than 5 years. Used to be 20 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of loyalty to company or company loyalty to individual, that's all been shredded.
Mm-hmm.
You have lax controls and oversight. I can give you many examples of situations where the business or social organization said, hey, you know what? Sally's been doing this job for me in purchasing and payments for 25 years or 30 years.
Right.
Only to find out every day Sally is taking money. They're creating false purchase orders. They're creating false suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, false payments. and the business owner doesn't have the opportunity to check through all that stuff. So it's a matter of having lax controls and oversight. Our system already provides that oversight immediately.
Yeah, I was going to say, because a small business doesn't have the capability to provide that oversight.
Small business person wears, as you know, about 5 or 6 different
Yeah,
hats.
yeah,
You know, from
exactly.
HR, finance, marketing, sales. Plus, they want to be in front of the
customers. Right.
and whatever. Right. So, a lot of this just goes unnoticed. Okay. Whereas now, there's an opportunity, and that's where the productivity comes in, where the system enables the owner or.
But that's an This is an example now where an employee is taking advantage of the company
Sure.
that they're working for. Correct.
Correct. In the $65 billion figure, about 60% of it happens in the purchase through payment process,
Really.
and then the rest of it happens, where you have people knock on your door, your front door, and while you're talking to that person, somebody's coming in through the back door. Okay.
Okay.
Somebody is misrepresenting themselves in the front door, and you have the usual kinds of theft and scams. Our site won't really help there.
Right.
Our site really helps in the purchasing through payment process.
Yeah. Say a little bit more about that, Don, because what happens? What are some examples of other than you gave the one example of a person, a trusted employee who's basically dipping into the pot on a regular basis.
Sure. There's the example of the gal who was an administrative person, and using a credit card, company supplied credit card, and buying foodstuffs, every week for the plant. Unfortunately, the foodstuffs weren't for the plant. The groceries and the drinks were for her. Okay, to support her needs, weekly needs. You have the instance of the another procurement card type of a scam where when you look at procurement card statements, they're very general in terms of their definitions. When you look at the summary, it doesn't give you specifics. It might say, for instance, in this case, it might say oil was purchased.
Right.
Okay. Well, after you see oil being purchased over and over and over again at this particular plant, you start questioning yourself. How can they be using
so much oil?
So much oil, and you say, well, let's take a look at it.
Right.
And you dig into it, and you find out that it wasn't really oil; it was horse liniment. Okay, for the one employee's small horse farm that was being purchased on a credit card.
Okay.
One of the things we've noticed about our system too, Dave, is that it's going to avoid people with if they have a bad intention.
Okay.
The fact that the things are recorded, so poor behavior, it really discourages that.
Okay, so they're
People are
more
watching,
aware
right.
of
There you go.
of being caught,
Yes.
basically. So.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
we define a lot of these things as syndromes. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
And the first one is the no vacation syndrome. I mean, how many of you know people who just never seem to take vacation?
But that's because they're such loyal,
Right.
conscientious employees, right?
That's exactly right, because they don't want anybody in their knickers.
Oh.
Okay, and when they get in their knickers, they find out all kinds of awful stuff that's occurred. In terms of embezzlement and fraud, and all the other types of things we talked about earlier.
Okay.
So if you have an employee who's not taking a vacation, that's could be a sign of something going wrong.
Other than just being conscientious.
And what happens too, Dave, is that bad things happen to good people sometimes, as you know. So these people do not go out with the intention of committing fraud or embezzlement. But things happen where they get a little bit behind on something. They need tires or whatever. So their original intention is to pay it back.
Right.
But sometimes it gets more and more difficult to pay it back.
And they start digging a hole.
Right, if there's an addiction to gambling or whatever.
Sure.
So to protect the owner, naturally the system is there to discourage.
Yeah, and these purchasing cards that the companies are using, I mean, they're using them because it actually helps them in terms of making things more efficient, right?
Yeah, it's an efficiency from a standpoint that they don't have to roll out their large software process to all of these employees who are
Right.
scattered throughout the country or the world.
Sure.
They can use the procurement card, and that captures the transaction. You don't have to make purchase order documents out for everything.
Exactly. So
Okay.
the process is less complicated.
Yeah, you don't have an invoice coming in for everything, so it eliminates invoices. So there's lots of efficiencies there.
Right.
The problem is that it's very expensive to audit credit cards. So you get involved in the auditing process, and you get a lot of third parties who are working with banks. They're downloading files of individuals and their transactions,
Okay.
and they're reviewing those. They're sending them back to employees, though, anyway, for employees to say yes or no that it was a transaction. And these third-party scenarios and software and processes are costing a lot of money.
Sure.
Okay.
Our system is such that when a person's making a credit card transaction, they can make what we call a ghost purchase order transaction, send the ghost purchase order to accounts payable. So when the person's credit card statement comes in at the end of the month, the person in accounts payable can audit to all of the ghost purchase orders,
Okay.
and get the full line item detail.
They can match it up
Yeah.
against
Yeah.
the purchase.
Yeah, without having all that expensive third-party effort going on.
Okay. That makes so this basically closes one of the doors, so to speak, with regard to an abuse of the company credit card.
Yeah, because if you're told that you have to fill out X number of fields on a purchase order document as you're using the credit card process, okay, it makes you think twice. Because if you fill it out wrong at that point in time, okay, you're in real trouble because now you're criminally liable.
Okay.
And the big banks are encouraging companies to use purchasing cards for
Yeah.
the reason that, okay, you don't have to have personnel doing the three-ray matching of the invoices and things
Right.
like that.
The process
But
is
what
just a lot
happens
easier.
is, and I think a number of companies realize this, is that there's a fair amount of leakage. In other words, people abusing it. And some companies say that, okay, we'll put up with a little bit of leakage because we're still avoiding the cost of having to hire a number of people to do the invoicing.
Yeah.
Whereas with us
Yeah.
now, if you have to put in the light item detail, like I said previously, it discourages people from doing it to begin with. But then, we have that traceability when they are using the
I can remember having a professor that said, "Look, it doesn't matter what kind of a system you set up. You'll always have a certain percentage of people who try to take advantage of it."
Right.
And so, I guess what you're saying, Tom, is if the percentage is low enough, some companies just say, "We'll live with that because overall it's still
We're
saving
saving
us
money."
money
Right.
and it's working."
Right.
But
But now they no longer have to do that. With our system, people can still have the purchasing cards.
right.
We're just asking them to put the transaction information in Focus Buyer.
So you're
So the
putting
fact-
the onus on the employee.
There you go. The fact that they have to do that is where it's going to discourage them from, oh, somebody's watching me. I better not do that.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
now you should know that everything we do, every time we spend money, it's a purchase. So no matter what we spend it on, when we put money out of our pocket, it's a purchase.
Mhm.
You're purchasing a product, a service, something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're purchasing it. And it also goes for travel and living. The same issue with credit cards is true for travel and living cards. Okay, where folks go out on a trip, okay, and they're trying to collect all of their expenses, okay, and lots of details are missing, and you have the same auditing problem.
Sure.
Third-party auditing problem. You have the same problem with not having line item detail. Our system allows through our multiple line item purchase process to be able to actually do your travel and living expenses right there on the site, and have everything, including the line item detail, as part of your travel and living expense for the month or for a project.
So
or
in
whatever.
other words, your site will let people fill out whatever they need to submit to the company for business expenses?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, I don't want to give anybody the wrong opinion, from the audience here. I mean, there's nothing wrong with using credit cards, procurement cards, okay, and travel and living cards. I mean,
Sure.
it's a good thing. It just needs to have an easier, faster, and more plausible way to make sure that the expenditures are correct expenditures.
Yeah, and people need to know that it's going to be easier for them to be held accountable.
Correct.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
I mean,
Right.
you're still going to have what I call the thrill seekers, Okay, they're the folks who say, I can get away with this. Okay,
Sure.
just because I can get away with this, and that's another issue. But again, they're going to have to, if they use the system, they're going to have an issue. I mean, our system also has what we call an escrow payment process. Okay, because a lot of fraud and embezzlement happens where people pay money up front. Okay, and then the folks don't show up, or lots of other issues around the money that they put up front.
Okay.
With our system, you can use an escrow payment process where the buyer says, I want to use what we call and registered as precious payment. And the seller says, okay, I'll accept that. And the way it works then is that the seller knows that the money is going to be put in escrow. So they know if they do the job according to the contract that they have, that they're going to get paid.
They'll get it.
Yeah, and it remains the buyer's money,
Mhm.
but the buyer can't get it back unless they also comply with the contract that they've written. So it protects both parties.
Interesting. Are sellers willing to accept that as opposed to actually getting the money up front, or is it a signal that there's a problem if they say no, it's not
Well,
acceptable?
you hit the nail on the head, right? It's up to the seller, but if they don't want to, well, maybe there's a
You might
a
wonder
reason.
why.
It might be a reason why, or there may be a legitimate reason, but at least you'd have that conversation,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
if if the buyer wants to actually buy materials, instead of having the seller buy the materials, the buyer now has a way to buy the materials,
Mhm.
document that purchase, and provide them to the seller. Okay, without the seller having to take the responsibility for materials and also the need for upfront money.
And the- and-
Okay.
and the
So
big-
it protects it protects the buyer to some degree.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if the buyer puts the money up, they can have title to that material.
Right.
So in the unfortunate event that maybe the supplier goes belly up or whatever, your material is your material.
You own it.
It won't be subject to any bankruptcy laws or anything like that, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, and
So-
then you have the other syndrome where somebody says, it's owed me. I'm working a lot of hours. Okay, I'm doing a lot of great
I'm
things.
entitled.
Yeah,
I'm entitled.
right.
Okay, I'm not getting paid what I should.
Right.
I'm entitled.
Oh, nobody feels that, do they?
Right.
Happens every day.
Yeah.
Happens every day. The worker who comes in, the machinist who comes in and is machining bronze all day long, and then in the lunch pail goes a piece of bronze when they leave the plant at night.
Sure.
All kinds of stuff. Then you have what I call the my territory and turf syndrome.
Okay.
Okay, you'll have a leader who is responsible for an area, and they won't let anybody in to the area at all.
From within the organization.
From within the organization to look at it, and you take a look at the process, and you say, this person's wearing a lot of really nice clothes. This person's taken a lot of trips into gambling city.
Living above our means,
Yeah,
are
right,
we?
yeah.
A little
living,
bit.
Driving
living
a
above
nice
the
car,
means,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
And then you find out that multiple millions of dollars have been embezzled in the process and support a gambling habit and a lifestyle habit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just, it's a complicated way to live.
It is, but if you feel you can get away with it,
I
and you're a
guess.
thrill
Right,
seeker,
right.
Wow,
you'll
yeah.
go for it.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I understand that
Right.
if you're
And it's-
addicted to the game kind
Yeah,
of a thing.
And it's a reasonable request for an owner or whatever to want their employees to use Focus Buyer or to use a system like this.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, it's not onerous.
that's right, right. It helps them
Mm-hmm.
and the employee too.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk for a minute about regular commerce versus e-commerce. What's going on in those two areas with with this problem? Is it expanding as quickly in regular commerce as it is in e-commerce?
It expands in regular commerce in the world of services.
Okay.
There is a myriad of services, okay, and if you look at where the majority of fraud, for instance, happens with senior citizens, it's in homeowner services. Putting in a new roof on the house, putting new sidewalks in, getting your carpets cleaned, on and on and on.
Okay.
And that's not going away. I mean, home ownership has rebounded, and and homes are selling at a fairly brisk pace.
Mhm.
Hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah, let's hope.
Yeah, but mostly in the regular commerce, you'll find it in the services area.
Okay.
You will find it in some cases where you have what I call the playing ball syndrome, where it's kind of like I can give you this purchase order contract, but I need 4 tires for my car.
Can you help me out?
Can you help me out? Yeah.
So it's kind of a quid pro quo. I'll give you the contract if.
Yeah.
Isn't that commonly known as a kickback?
It's called lots of things.
Okay. I'll bet.
And then you have the people are in cahoots together, okay, where the seller and the buyer, okay, determine that it's beneficial for both of them, okay, to do things together, okay. So
They collude.
they collude, yeah. So there's lots of ways. Even if you have policies and procedures, there's lots of ways to get around them. So let's say that anything less than $15,000 doesn't have to be competitively bid.
Okay.
Anything over $15,000 has to be competitively bid. Well, what happens is all of a sudden you get
$14.9999.
you get 3 inquiries put out for $5,000 a piece, not for $15,000. Okay, and the order is placed for each one of them for $5,000 a piece. So it's below the process.
So no one is looking that closely at it.
Right. Or a purchase order is put out with a price that's within the budget that the buyer has,
Mhm.
but all of a sudden there's all kinds of add-ons and extras, okay, that the buyer approves. Okay, and instead of $15,000, it's $25,000. Okay, and it all looks legit because there's a supplement to the purchase order document, and there's a quote by the supplier,
Mhm.
and everything looks in order.
Looks legitimate.
Yeah. So for e-commerce, the e-commerce process is such that everybody's trying to get into your knickers in the world of e-commerce.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to steal your identity online. Okay, they're trying to find out who you're talking to online. Okay,
Your credit card numbers and
all that kind of stuff,
Right.
and it's an issue because the folks online oftentimes don't realize, through what they call phishing scams, PHISING
Okay.
scams, where they send you what looks to be a legitimate email. And you look at it and say, "Oh yeah, that's an email for me. I should open that up." And boom, they open it up, and next thing you know, the hackers got all of their information, and they're following everything they do and all their keystrokes.
So just by opening up that an email from someone, you can be giving them access to a lot of personal information.
But like Don said, it looks very legit. It'd be on the letterhead of the particular company and whatever. So
I'm sure
it's
I've
easy,
opened
right.
up some
Sure.
of those emails.
Right.
And sometimes they'll have attachments, and they'll ask you to open an attachment, verifying some information. And again, it's all a phishing scam,
They're just looking for
And-
access.
looking for access. And then the other thing with online commerce, you have lots of good companies,
Mm-hmm.
but even these great big companies who are very prevalent on the internet, they use a lot of subcontractors. And the subcontractors don't necessarily give you the quality of products and services that you thought you were going to get.
Okay.
Okay, so you can get into a do loop around. Oh, I thought I was getting this product. No, I didn't get it. Okay, you got to go back to the main person and main supplier and say, I didn't get what I wanted, and they say, well, send it back and we'll get it. And then the next thing you know, you get something else. It's still not exactly what you wanted, and then you do it all again. But as we said earlier in the program, the onus is on the buyer. That's why it's called buyer beware.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's the individual against some very large organizations, and typically that doesn't bode well for the
Right.
individual,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have other syndromes like the no competition syndrome. I've been buying this particular item or service from this particular seller supplier for years, okay, and he or she's always treated me right,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a new requisition for a new requirement of something that I've bought from that person before. They give me a quote. I don't pay much attention to it because I'm
Kind of rubber stamp it.
fully trustworthy, and something that was $300 a year or two ago is all of a sudden it's $1,000. okay, and no one's wiser because it looks all legit. Quote, purchase order, everything is in place.
And along those same lines, you want to make sure you are buying competitively. Like Don said, you may be doing business over a number of years.
Well, and you get complacent.
You get
It's
complacent,
easy, right?
sure, and then the supplier too kind of takes you for advantage.
Sure.
All
Takes
right.
you for granted.
Takes you for granted, right? And they give maybe their concessions to trying to get a new customer or a new client. So here's somebody that's been a loyal customer for, I don't know, 10, 20 years, and they're paying a higher price than somebody that just started with the seller or supplier last week.
Right.
And so you want to make sure that you're buying competitively. So again, you want an easy system that will enable you to go out for requests for quotations and whatever.
Okay. So, and that's part of the part of what you've got built into your application, makes it easier to
Yes.
get that information. So,
Yeah, we have templates. Okay, the templates make it easy and consistent to follow through the
Okay.
process. So each time you're not recreating the wheel.
Mhm.
And by the way, if you put the information one time, okay, you can just go to the reorder button and send out a new RFQ or a modified RFQ, or go right to a new purchase order using the information that's already there.
Right.
that's interesting because I'm guessing that's not something a lot of smaller companies would be able to do normally.
Right.
They,
You know.
they don't have the ability to
Right.
make the purchase
the
orders.
resources.
They
They
don't have the
wouldn't.
resources. And if you talk to the accounting folks at the end of the year, they get shoeboxes of receipts from the small businesses, and then they have to sort through all of them and figure out what they spent money on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I was just going to say that the smaller companies didn't have that kind of productivity, whereas the larger corporations that could afford the big ticket software,
Well, they
and the
can
maintenance,
invest in the controls.
Sure, and that's where part of that competitive advantage comes in. Right.
Sure.
Right.
They can.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got a magnitude of business that they're doing that it makes sense for them to invest in those controls, right?
Right.
Because they know that in the long run, it's probably going to save them money. But
Yeah, but
that's
what-
not something that a mid-size or a smaller company.
Just a little bit of an irony, though, that with these big systems and things like that, okay, maybe they'll able to save some money on material costs or things of this nature via the system. But what's happening a lot of times is they're just taking those savings and paying the software companies all these millions and millions of dollars.
You mean for the system that they've got?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Whereas us, there's no software cost, there's no maintenance cost, there's no transaction cost. That's what we meant when Don said that we want to take all the extra cost out of it so that
Okay.
it's
All right. Well, let's make sure we come back to that toward the end of the program and get as complete a picture of what you're offering, because I think it sounds kind of unique. It really does.
Well, we think it is, and at the end of the session, I'd like to talk about some of the agencies that folks can call
Okay.
if they do get into issues,
jam.
jam, and stuff of that nature.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, even in regular commerce, I mean, just the other day, this is crazy, but I was at a store. I was buying a sandwich, okay, and I gave the folks American greenbacks, okay, and I had to get change back, and I got 2 U.S. quarters and one franc coin. Now that French franc coin, okay, is the size of a quarter, okay.
So I got to start looking at my change.
So all of a sudden, okay, French francs aren't, they're not valid anymore.
They're not.
It's
Oh,
it's
they've
the
been
euro.
supplanted by the euro.
Yeah.
Oh.
So now
So it's
somebody.
worthless.
Yeah. So it's worthless. So now somebody who has a cache of 1 franc coins, okay, can be dishing them off, okay, and then folks are taking their money. They're not looking in details as to whether it's a quarter or it's a French franc coin, because it's about the same size.
Wow.
So what do you do with it? So I have a 1 franc French franc piece that's absolutely worthless. So not that it means much, but I lost 25 cents.
Well, if enough of them are in
Right.
circulation, it's going to mean something, right?
It's the idea.
Sure.
As Tom said before, this is all about trust. Okay, and do you trust your employees? Do you trust people that they're giving you, the right money when you're making a transaction? It's all about trust. And as the judiciary has said, if I had $1 for every time I heard about one of the plaintiffs talking about trust,
Right.
okay, I'd be retired. Okay, I'd be working on my bucket list, and I'd have lots of money, and I'd be a huge philanthropist.
That's kind of sad, isn't it? Because it's really saying, look, you really
and
be
that's
careful before you
what
trust
I
people.
meant before is that it's not that we're distrusting a lot of people or whatever. Bad things happen to good people and whatever.
Right.
All we're doing is we're not making it easy for people to take advantage
Sure.
of the owners or the business people or
Yeah.
whatever. Okay?
Well,
that's all. And
I mean, I'm sure that there's a certain amount of, why do you do this? Because I can.
yeah, right. Sure.
Because it's
Yeah.
a loose system now, and
Yeah.
I can get away with it, kind of a thing. I guess.
And as
right?
Tom said earlier, most people do it with the intention, I'll pay it back.
Sure,
But
right.
then they get in so deep, they can't pay it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
What do they say? The first thing when you're in a hole to do is stop digging, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
in this
And-
area, you can see how
Right.
that hole gets bigger and bigger.
And
And
our whole
it's easy. It's
Sure.
easy to do.
Right.
So in a sense, you guys are making it not so much harder to do, but you're building in more of a sense of accountability for
Sure.
what people do.
and traceability.
Yeah,
and bringing it-
exactly.
Right.
And all the entire process is online. So,
Right.
Yeah.
So you go to our website, you register, and you look at our online training guide, user guide, and within 60 minutes you're up and running, professionally buying and managing everything that you're purchasing, and
Really?
and protecting yourself.
Yeah. And our whole mission.
I think it would take me longer than 60 minutes, but I'm thinking about myself. But I'm not
Yeah.
what you call technology.
No, seriously, I personally guarantee if you do 2 or 3 requests for quotations, you'll be an expert.
Really?
That's all, absolutely. Right.
Okay.
The first one.
You've made
naturally,
it that
because it's
easy,
no-
huh?
We
Oh,
made it
yeah,
that
yeah,
easy.
right. And
Wow.
like Don said, with the templates, it becomes consistent. So both buyers and sellers are using the same platform, and they just have to use it a few times, and then you'll get more comfortable with it, and,
Right.
and whatever. And it's like anything else, maybe start a little bit slow,
Okay.
while you get comfortable before you take advantage of all of the features and benefits.
Okay.
And then one thing that I want to mention too is that even though there's a lot of benefits and advantages and things like that, but our mission, Don and I, is really it's about the users of the system. We're committed to making them successful in their business,
Okay.
and that by giving them the opportunity to increase their revenue, by enhancing their productivity.
When you talk
Okay,
about
and
the
reducing
users,
their
are you
cost.
talking about the buyers,
Buyers and sellers.
or
Buyers
both?
and sellers.
Both.
Both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Both.
system is interactive, okay, across all of our e-features. I see Bruce has been putting up some of our e-features there.
Oh.
So buyers and sellers are interactive across all of these e-features online.
Mm-hmm.
So not only is it good for the buyer, but it's also good for the supplier and seller,
Right.
because now they have an opportunity to see more requests for proposals. So if you guys are familiar with search engine optimization,
Yeah.
okay, Dave, everything you do says you're interested in wrestling.
Okay.
You
Yes.
were a Cornell wrestler.
Right.
You go to wrestling
Well,
matches and all that
I
kind
was
of
out
stuff.
there trying.
Yeah, referee though too. So
So all the
You're right in
advertisement,
there.
all the advertisements that you get online are about wrestling, because your behavior shows you're interested in wrestling.
Okay.
Okay.
And that's something people can just ask
So-
with the search engine
Yeah.
optimization.
So all of a sudden you get brand advertising or other types of advertising related to wrestling. But really and truly, I call that muddy search, because no one really knows whether you're going to click on the ad, and even if you click on the ad, they don't know if you're going to buy anything.
Right.
In our process, when somebody puts up an RFQ, request for quotation or
Right.
request for proposal, it's a valid sales lead. So if somebody's looking to buy an air compressor, okay, somebody who sells air compressors or air compressor parts and service, they want to advertise that person. It's good for the buyer, because the buyer may find somebody who can give them a better value for their money.
Okay.
And it's good for the seller, because now it's a real qualified sales lead.
right. It's target marketing.
So it's clear search.
Right.
Okay, that's interesting. So clearly this the application you have is not just for the buyer.
Oh no, it's valid sales leads, like Don said,
Okay.
and that's what salespeople want. Okay, is valid sales leads rather than. It's a lot nicer than a cold call. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
So we
absolutely.
can envision salespeople coming into their office in the morning. First thing they do is hop on Focus Buyer. Is there anybody out there looking for what we can provide?
Really.
Yeah, sure.
And
That's interesting.
our site is executed on a desktop, a laptop, a tablet, or a smartphone,
Okay, so it's completely mobile.
and you can be anywhere in the world
Hmm.
that has internet access, 24 by 7 by 365. So I could be in another country, okay, looking to qualify a supplier, determine that I've qualified the supplier.
Mm-hmm.
I can right there on my smartphone issue an RFQ, RFP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that person can send me an online offer. We can negotiate in person or online right there,
Mm-hmm.
and I can elect to place a purchase order and with a contract and my terms and conditions of purchase right there and then.
And there's no transaction fee. We don't make anything on that, right?
No. Okay. How does that work?
Well, it works. Our revenue model is subscription based.
Okay.
So the buyer may pay a small fee, monthly fee, depending on their size,
Mm-hmm.
and the seller pays a monthly fee depending on their size.
Okay.
The escrow payment process is about 1% of the cost of the transaction, so it's about 2% to 2.5% less than credit card
Costs.
interchange fees.
Okay.
So everybody doesn't like interchange fees, that run 3%, 3.5%.
Sure.
Okay, because the buyer's bank gets a piece of it, the seller's bank gets a piece of it, and the interchange bank gets a huge piece of it.
Right.
So we actually help that by reducing the
So you're
cost.
reducing that cost right
Yeah.
there.
That's what we want to do, is to eliminate the waste. We call it waste, but it's superfluous cost.
Okay.
So that what this does then, it drives the seller's cost down a little bit,
Mhm.
so they can maybe charge a little bit less to the buyer. So everybody wins.
Okay.
It's a win-win-win.
The other goal that we have that we haven't talked about yet is we're looking to give back to students. So students in colleges and universities, or even in high school who are taking business courses.
Right.
Okay, we have a separate URL, what we call an education and training URL, where students can role play as buyers and sellers and go completely 360 degrees through the procurement process and learn all about buying and selling. Okay, all about terms and conditions of purchase.
Can they negotiate online and everything else?
They can negotiate online. It's a live place where they can interact and learn all about the process.
That sounds pretty cool.
And as we know, most of these students are going to end up in some type of business, either their own business or maybe someone else's business.
Sure.
Okay, and ultimately they're going to be consumers for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Okay, so they're going to be subject to fraud and embezzlement and illegalities and scams, and this gives them a tool that they can use for the rest of their lives.
Right.
Well, it goes back to what you said before when you asked that question, have you ever been scammed, or do you know someone
Yeah.
who has been? And 99% of the audience raises their hand in, to one or the other, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, the elderly, going back to that target population, because you made a point of saying how much of the fraud is occurring in that area. And, what should people be looking for, and how can they prevent, being taken for a ride?
Well, the first thing is awareness. Okay, they need to, we and others need to make folks aware. So in New Jersey,
Of the possibility.
of the possibilities, and there are myriads of possibilities. There are hundreds of different ways. Okay, that people are trying to get seniors money.
Really?
Without going through all of them, it's a simple thing as getting fees for advanced loans. Anti-aging products and services that don't do anything for you.
Diet?
Diet, yeah. Do you know what anti-aging products and services? You know how much is spent on that every year?
No.
$20 billion,
Wow.
and most of them don't work.
Well, it's kind of looking for the fountain of youth, isn't it?
Right. Right.
I mean, it's things like duplicate travel bookings. You go on a website and you look for a booking, and you decide to book. okay, and then you get there, find out that it was pre-booked because somebody has scammed the website, okay, and created a duplicate booking for that particular site.
So you paid for a booking that
What was non-existent,
was not, and you have no. Oh man.
and you don't know until you get there.
Yeah,
Oh.
one of the things I was going to mention too is that the request for quotations
Right.
that we have, which are very important. You know, you want to get something in writing and you want competitive pricing, etc.
Sure.
Well, you can do this if you want and remain anonymous. So you don't have to identify your name or anything else
When you put out
you're,
the
when you're
request.
putting out the request, if you so choose.
Okay.
Okay, and then once you select somebody that you want to negotiate with and you gain that confidence, then yes, you can divulge your
Okay.
personal
Is that
information
a
at
common business practice that it's put out anonymously, or
Well, I mentioned it more towards the elderly. A lot of times the elderly don't want to divulge their
And the
personal
consumer.
info.
Okay.
And the
Okay.
consumer. That's
Okay.
But the
why.
site does
until
allow.
they've made a decision that they
Yeah.
want to explore
Sure.
it with a
Right.
particular seller?
Yeah, and the site allows them to put in some information like a zip code
Oh, yeah.
and a city or a state, so the seller or supplier gets an idea of where they're going to be shipping
Shipping
a product
stuff or- right.
or providing a service.
Mm-hmm.
But there's the things like the grief scams and the theft of belongings. Okay, people scan the pages for funerals. Okay, and try to find out who's died and when the services are, because they know that the house will be vacant at the time.
I saw that on the list that you had put together, and it just sort of like, oh my God.
Yeah, I mean, you have a relative, your grandson's in Canada, and somebody calls you and says that, they're being taken to the police station and they're in all kinds of trouble, and you need to wire X number of dollars.
Yeah.
Because the grandson doesn't want the parents to know, so the grandfather, grandmother, they do it.
Yeah.
Or it's a romantic scheme, okay, and somebody from overseas gets in touch with you through one of the romantic sites, and they look really good, really fine-looking person. And they say, I just need $3,000 or $4,000, and then maybe I can get over to see you, and people are doing it every day, all day long. So it's all about awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, and unfortunately, I don't think there's enough of it. Okay, the government agencies are trying to do it, but I'd like to see some of the other social groups. Okay, like Rotary and Lions Club and others who do community service.
Right.
I'd like to see them get involved, okay, and try to help this whole problem for seniors, okay, and having a hotline or something.
Really, and build more awareness, but also kind of a support system when things start to go south for somebody they're taking advantage of.
Yeah, or just a place to call and say, hey, I really need to fix my bathroom, but I'm really worried about trying to contract for this. Can somebody come and help me? I mean,
so even before they make an agreement,
Yeah.
kind of run it past to kind of legitimize the
Protect themselves.
protect themselves.
I mean,
that's interesting.
In today's world, you have lots of senior citizens who are doing taxes for other senior citizens
Right.
who are even older than they are.
Right.
Okay, as volunteers.
Okay.
Okay, or for very little money. Okay, so I think that more has to be done in the community. Okay, to help this whole onslaught. Okay, fraud and embezzlement, and especially against senior citizens.
Another interesting point while I'm thinking of it
Sure.
is another feature that we have is we refer to it as the group buy, so that people can pool their
Like a purchasing
requirements.
power group?
There you go, using leverage. Here
Okay.
again, it gives a small and mid-sized company the opportunity to maybe join their requirements or their needs with others, and that gives them purchasing power.
Sure.
Which again makes them better competitive.
So that
And they
would be
can-
something like a Chamber of Commerce could offer
Right.
to its members?
Yeah,
so
exactly, or
so-
whatever. Sure.
Yeah, so a Chamber of Commerce, okay, let's say they have 2,000 members,
Right.
and each one of the members uses 100 reams of copy paper a year.
Sure.
Okay, what is that, 200,000 reams of copy paper? So the Chamber can go out on an RFQ, RFP for 200,000 reams of copy paper.
Right.
And instead of paying $4 or $5 or $6, maybe they're paying $3.65 per ream of copy paper.
Sure.
Okay, the Chamber can create a master contract, and then all of the members can use Focus Buyer to cut purchase orders and reference the master contract. So now not only do you get the process, okay, of getting a better by,
Mhm.
but you also document the process so the chamber knows what it's doing for its members and the members knows what it's doing for the chamber.
Yeah, and a lot of times people belong to chambers to improve their top line, to be able to do business with other members.
Sure, they're
Okay,
looking for leads.
they're looking
and-
for leads or contacts or whatever, and usually until now there's been really no platform or an enabler. Whereas here, Focus Buyer is an enabler to improve or enhance the amount of business that members do amongst themselves.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm not sure what the time's like.
We got a couple of minutes.
Could I-
If people want more information about your application, what's the best way to get that?
Well, they can email me directly at don@focusedbuyer.com
Mm-hmm.
or info@focusedbuyer.com. Or they can give us a call, 908-265-9136.
And I'm Tom at focusbuyer.com.
Okay, that's pretty
Right.
simple.
Yeah.
And your website is www.focusbuyer.com?
Right.
Right.
And it's preceded, so everybody knows, by an HTTPS, which means it's a secure website.
Is that
Okay,
what that means?
And it's encrypted.
Okay.
In
Right.
terms of the doesn't
Very-
mean you can't be hacked,
Right.
but
But
it gives you that
Yeah.
that warm sense.
Okay.
And before we leave, I'd just like to mention some of these agencies and some of the
Sure.
information.
Yeah, no, you mentioned you wanted to do
Yeah,
that before.
so there's always the Better Business Bureau,
Right.
Okay, and they're located in state by state basis, so you can look those up, online. You can also do that for the attorney generals of your state. Okay, they can get involved in that.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
There's the Federal Trade Commission, and there's 877-987-3728 is a complaint line. And if you have an ID
For the FTC?
FTC, if you had an ID theft, that number from the FTC is 877-438-4338. There's also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a new government agency. It's a few years old. And it's www.consumerprotection.gov at 855-411-2372 that you can call.
Okay.
New Jersey has its book called the Fed Up, FED-UP handbook.
Yeah.
And that's www.newjerseyconsumeraffairs.gov
Okay.
at 877-746-7850.
Now, is any of this information on your website? If people, because I know you have a piece on your website, commonly asked questions, right?
Yeah, we don't have this up yet.
Okay.
But it's something that we're considering to put up.
Okay.
In New Jersey, to report fraud, it's 800-242-5846. You can also go to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service under some circumstances, which is 877-876-2455. And then you have the credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion,
Right.
that you can call directly. And Equifax is 800-685-1111. Experian is 888-397-3742.
Mm-hmm.
And TransUnion is 800-916-8800. Their websites are their name.com in every case.
Right.
And they also have the National Do Not Call Registry, okay, which people are familiar with. That's www.donotcall.gov, 888-382-1222. So these are some ways that folks can help themselves out.
Okay. But in most cases, that's going to be, as you said before, after the fact, right?
After the fact.
As opposed
Yeah.
to more of a preventative kind of thing.
Which is really what you want to do.
Yeah, ideally,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
Yeah.
And discourage poor behavior and right. In other words, be proactive.
Yeah.
And
Is that kind of when you talk about preventing it? Is it you're building things in to discourage negative behavior?
Yes.
On the
Yeah.
part?
The templates have about 600 database pieces, and they can be all accessed,
Mhm.
okay, easily. So the goal of the templates is to keep buyers from cheating sellers, keep sellers from cheating buyers, and keeping buyers and sellers from conspiring to cheat companies and organizations.
Interesting.
yeah, the system is very comprehensive yet very flexible.
Okay, great. I think we've just about run out of time. I thank the two of you very,
Thank
very
you, Dave,
much
for your time.
Yeah,
we
thanks.
appreciate
Well,
it.
Thanks for
Right.
sharing your knowledge,
Yeah.
because this is not an area that I pretend to have a lot of knowledge in. So it's
Well,
interesting
a lot of
to
people
hear
don't
from people that do.
because heretofore something like this was not available.
Okay. Thanks very much, gentlemen.
Thanks,
Thanks, Dave.
Right.
Thanks, Bruce.